Good evening. So it's been a little while since I've had the opportunity to put anything online. I got two books for Hanukkah. One of them is called Creative Judaism, and it is by Ira Eisenstein. And then the other book is Mishnah Torah, which is the repetition of the Torah, by the Rambam, with an M at the end. There's a Ramban and a Rambam. He was, I want to say, 11th century, maybe 10th century, physician, rabbi, and he codified the Torah. So anyway, we'll get to that one later, but I wanted to quickly touch base a little bit on Creative Judaism. This is a book written by a Reconstructionist rabbi. Reconstructionist, basically, one of the sayings is something to the effect of make the old new and make the new holy. There's a lot of times that, and I'm sure it's in every faith, things that don't exactly make sense or things that don't jibe with you. And while we still have to do those, this is Reconstructionism for one thing, not its total reason for existence, but for one thing, it tries to bring meaning to perhaps those antiquated things that are out there. So this book, let me just read part of the introduction. It says, the purpose of this book is to make clear exactly what it means to be a Jew. Now that's a big mouthful right there. It is necessary to do this in our day because so many Jews are confused as to what distinguishes them from non-Jews. To such an extent is the confusion felt that many Jews do not know what is expected of them, nor what they may expect from Jewish life. As a result, Jewish life has suffered, Jewish institutions suffer for want of support, Jewish movements suffer for want of devoted followers, Jewish education suffers because Jews, in their confusion, do not realize what value such education might have for them, and do not know, even when they are interested, what they ought to learn. What to learn. Excuse me, I'm losing my voice just a little bit. It's been so cold recently. I hope everybody stayed warm. They've had snow down south. We had some snow here. We had about 7 inches of snow here. And I think we've all been sniffly and snorty for a while and so forth. So anyway, I hope everybody stays well. So I want to read the chapter. This is in the first section called The Current Versions of Judaism. And this is chapter 8, the Reform version of Judaism. Reform was the first attempt made to adjust Judaism to the modern state, modern economic life, and modern thought. It began in Germany about a century ago and was introduced into the United States by Isaac M. Wise. He founded the Hebrew Union College for the training of Reform rabbis, the Central Conference of American Rabbis, an organization of Reform rabbis, and the Union of American Hebrew Congregations, an organization of Reform congregations. In 1885, the Central Conference of American Rabbis met in Pittsburgh and adopted a platform known as the Pittsburgh Platform, which served American reform as a guide for more than 50 years. In 1937, however, in Columbus, Ohio, a new set of principles was adopted, which made certain basic changes in the reform program. On the basis of those principles, and on the basis of many books, pamphlets, and articles written by leaders of the reform movement, we shall be able to learn what reform stands for. First of all, the idea of God. That's part one. In traditional Judaism, three ideas occupied positions of equal importance: the idea of God, the idea of Torah, and the idea of the Jewish people. According to Reform, the idea of God was most important because the moral life depends upon the conception of God. Since religion is supposed to be concerned with the moral life, Jewish religion makes for the highest moral life because the Jewish conception of God is the noblest and the best. It is true that at various periods in Jewish history, the God idea changed, but in each period it was truer and better than the God idea which the other nations had. How do people in general come to know about God and his presence in the world? They used to believe that God literally revealed himself to some great man and told that man how people should live. But, says Reform, although we today do not believe that God revealed his way in that way, we do agree with the ancient Jews that man cannot find out scientifically what is right and wrong. For the modern man, conscience is the means by which God dictates what is right and what is wrong. The result is the same. Formerly, revelation told people to be righteous. Today, our conscience tells us to be righteous. And when our conscience grows more sensitive and tells us that certain things which we thought were good before are now to be considered bad, we realize that we are getting a better understanding of God's will. If we can keep this thought clearly in mind, we should continue to use the word revelation to emphasize the fact that conscience is the only way in which God reveals himself. There is also another way of knowing that there is a God in the world, and that is by looking about us and seeing God's work in nature. The beauty, the unity, the power of nature help us to understand the holiness, unity, and power of God. Of these qualities, the most significant is unity, because it denies the mistaken belief of other religions, like the belief in Satan or the belief in intermediaries between God and man. Such beliefs do not lead to the highest moral life. Judaism emphasizes both justice and love, unlike Christianity, which does not emphasize justice sufficiently, and unlike the Islam, which does not emphasize love sufficiently. Judaism, furthermore, conceives of a God as the creator of the world. This does not mean that the world as we know it was created at one time, all complete. It means that God is constantly created. It is he who was responsible for the evolution of man from the lower animals, and today he continues to create more wonderful and more moral beings for the future. This is the great miracle of life. Of course, says Reform, the kind of miracles described in the Bible could have never happened, but that does not mean that there is no such thing as a miracle. If that were so, we should be able to understand everything, but we human beings understand very little. All of life, therefore, is for us a miracle. To summarize, Reform teaches that God is one and holy, that mankind is one, and that truth, justice, and peace will ultimately be obtained. Part 2. The idea of the Jewish people. According to traditional Judaism, Israel was the only people to receive God's revelation, the revelation of God's will. It is therefore the chosen people. But since it is impossible for Jews to consider themselves the chosen people in that sense any longer, Reform proposes that the Jews regard themselves as chosen in the sense that they have contributed more than any other people towards spreading the true idea of God, which leads to morality. Sorry, I'm going to need to get a drink here. After all, the religions which have preached morality, Christianity and Mohammedanism, just about got that, have grown out of Judaism. Of course, other nations have made contributions. The Greeks to general knowledge, the Romans to the science of government. But these nations were not conscious of the fact that they were making a valuable contribution to the world. The Jewish people has been conscious of the importance of its contribution and therefore deserves to be given a unique place among the nations of the world. The chief importance of the Jewish contribution is the fact that it was made in the field of religion. The idea of God is of greater importance to human welfare than his science, art, or government. The question may be asked, since the contribution has already been made to the world, why then need the Jewish people continue to exist? The Greeks and Romans disappeared, and yet does not the world possess all that they gave to it? Reform answers that question, that idea, that God cannot be taught merely through a book. It must be taught by the kind of life that people live. The Jewish people must live on in order to teach the world the idea of God. This is the mission of the Jewish people, and I agree wholeheartedly, and that's indeed what the Bible says. For this reason, intermarriage must be opposed. If Jews intermarry with other people, they will soon disappear, and if the race disappears, the world will lose the benefit of the genus for religion. I think we've seen, and this is my commentary, I think we've seen enough over the years to know that the Jews will survive, regardless, one way or the other, but I think his point is well taken. The fact that the Jews continue as a people does not mean that they are to regard themselves as a nation. The traditional idea that all Israel would return to the land of Israel must be given up. Of course, those Jews who live in countries where they are persecuted and oppressed should be free to join their fellow Jews in the Republic of Israel. But in those lands where Jews enjoy the benefits of democracy, they must think of themselves as permanently established. And never mind. The dispersion of the Jews throughout the world should no longer be understood as a punishment for sins. It is a part of God's plan to enable the Jews to carry out their mission. Besides, considering themselves as a nation would tend to separate the Jews from the non-Jewish world, and that would interfere with the process of teaching the non-Jews. In order to influence the world, Jews must take their place in the world on the same plane with other peoples. From this point of view, the emancipation was a definite step forward in the accomplishment of the mission and should be hailed as such. Part 3, the idea of Torah. When traditional Judaism referred to Torah, it meant the written law, together with the oral law, which includes the Talmud and all other rabbinic interpretations of the Bible and decisions of the law. Torah, as we have seen before, covered the entire range of human life and governed especially the social relationships and economic interests of the Jewish people. Reform has very little room in its program for Torah in this sense. Present conditions have eliminated from Jewish life all occasion for any kind of civic or communal authority, and therefore Torah in the old sense of the word has no place in Jewish life. But there is one aspect of the Torah which can deal and should be retained and emphasized. That is the great moral teachings contained within classical Jewish writings. The moral teachings constitute a type of ethics which no moral teachers of any other people taught. Buddhism emphasized the need for overcoming one's desires and appetites. The Greeks made happiness the goal of human life. Christianity placed all of its emphasis upon the hereafter. Jewish moral teaching, however, emphasizes purity, holiness, modesty, and justice, and these the world needs most in our day. Although these teachings are to be found throughout the written and oral law, they are most emphasized in the prophetic books, to which reform assigns a role of great importance as a means of making Judaism a moral force in the world. Ideas alone, however, are not sufficient to keep a religion alive. These ideas must be expressed in ceremonies. It is therefore essential to retain the synagogue for worship and even some of ancient forms of prayer, although changes have been made so that whatever is not in keeping with the highest ideals of the age is eliminated. Shabbat should be observed, although without many of the don'ts which traditional Judaism imposed. Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, with their message of spiritual revival, Passover, Shavuot, and Sukkot, with their historical associations, should be retained, but not only should some of these old ceremonies be kept in modernized form, new ones must be created. Thus, Reform created the ceremony of confirmation for boys and girls, which takes place upon Shavuot, and which is designed to keep alive the memory of Israel's acceptance of its mission to the idea of God to the world. So I thought you might enjoy that. I may come back and read a couple more chapters. I'm currently about to start the chapter called the Neo-Orthodox version of Judaism, and that's going to talk about the conservative movement. But I hope you enjoyed that. I don't know if I'll do that next or if I will do some Mishnah Torah, but I invite you to come back and listen, and I thank you for listening. Have a wonderful evening, and shalom.